Hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Red Ben TV. It is your daily news update. I am Chris Pajak and I am joining you today from very, very cold Liverpool football. Not Liverpool Football Club. I've got a few news stories for you, but I'm not going to lie. It's a slow news day. It's a very slow news day. We do have some quite interesting stuff to talk about. For starters, I think the sin bin stuff from yesterday was really quite interesting. And Dale Johnson, our resident VAR expert, or the world's resident VAR expert, talking about it, saying decisions on today's IFAB meeting in short. There's going to be a trial of only captain being able to approach the referee in certain major game situations. Sin bins for dissent and specific tactical offences to be trialled at higher levels of football, and stricter applications of laws for mass confrontations. He also goes on to say, development of semi-automated offside is a priority. Referee announcing the final decision after a VAR review likely to enter the laws, and greater application of 6-second rule for goalkeepers and delay in restarts for managing injuries. There is a few more things there to talk about, but I wanted to sort of talk about the sin bin stuff more than anything and get your opinion on it. Obviously, if you're watching this live now, or feel free to get into the chat with your opinions. Do you like sin bins? Do you think the idea is good for Premier League football? Let me know in the comments. I'll go through some of them, of course. But this is Anfield have taken the article and said sin bins could be introduced in the Premier League as early as next season. So a new report claiming sin bins could be introduced as early as next season. The move, which would arguably be the biggest rule change in football since the alteration of the offside law, is, and I quote, set to be introduced into professional football, end quote. Report Ben Rumsby of The Telegraph. Now, for me, I think we've heard about sin bins for quite some time, really, haven't we? And it's never really felt like it was going to be introduced. Obviously, we know that it's been used in grassroots level and all that type of stuff, around Merseyside even. And apparently it has kind of helped, but there has been problems as well. And excuse me, there always will be problems, I suppose, in any new thing. And there's always going to be people who preferred it back in my day, and there's always going to be people who are for it, maybe. And I think the big thing for me on this one is that I think what we've seen over maybe the last 6 months, you could maybe include the last 12 months, is with VAR, excuse me, and the introduction of VAR, more importantly, and people just being sent off for things using video analysis, it feels like seeing more red cards in games, and we are seeing games decided more by the referee now than maybe ever before. And that might be to do with the fact that, like, players have got away with stuff for a lot longer, because you don't go back, you don't use the video analysis, the referee might not see these things, and some people will say, well, it was better then, and other people will say, well, if they're breaking the rules and they should be sent off. And that's where I think this law change could come in, is that, we've seen sin bins in rugby for a long time now. Player goes off the field for 10 minutes, team's down to 10 men for a little, team will be down to 10 men in football terms for a little while. And the player comes back on. Now, these could be introduced for cynical challenges, is one of the things that they're talking about, in terms of you pull a player back by the shirt. It's not deemed worthy of a red card, but it is a game-altering foul. Chiellini versus Saka in the Euro 2020 final is the case in point here, that everybody's talking about. He would probably have been off the field for 10 minutes. It might stop the cynical fouls. I think the other part of this is the bullying of referees, the grouping around of players. We've seen very, very good sides do this for a very long time. Manchester City are very good at influencing, I think, the referee in terms of numbers and surrounding them, making it difficult for them to make a decision against them, or just influence them for a decision for them and stuff like that. So it is interesting. It would be a massive rule change, really, I think, and one that will take a little bit of getting used to, sorry. And it's difficult because I think what would happen is we're going to see loads and loads of sin bins, and then all of a sudden I think those professional fouls might stop. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is there'll probably be teething pains, where you go over the top. And I think referees have always kind of done this. And when they tried to cut down, I remember a few years ago on players pulling shirts in the penalty area from corners, you saw loads of fouls get given and penalties get given, and all of a sudden they kind of just stopped it. It wasn't really that the players stopped it in that instance, it was that the referees stopped calling it. But I think in this instance it might be that you get loads and loads of sin bins, players stop doing the fouls that get you sin bins, and we see more games between 11v11 and less professional fouls. So I think there's got a good chance, thinking about it, that it actually might work. But equally, there's a part of me, there's a little devil on the shoulder here going, it's the FA and the Premier League, and they always mess stuff up and they always apply these rules wrong, so probably it's going to actually negatively impact the game. Thomas Doughton, I think it's a good idea. I think VAR's a good idea, but the FA, referees and officials are shat, so everything is a bad idea. Yes. Liverpool Fan 7, this is my first time catching you live. Love the channel. Thank you very much for joining us, Liverpool Fan 7, getting in the comments and stuff like that. Really appreciate that. I'm glad that you're able to watch us live. Okay, Lee Guy, if you're wondering where the intro to this show of Heidi High came from, it was Lee Guy who was in the comments really early and put it in my head. I read it just as I was about to start, and I wasn't planning on saying Heidi High, but I ended up saying Heidi High, and that's your fault, Lee. Thank you for that. JD with about 3 underscores says it's a good idea in theory, but you're still going to have the corrupt inconsistency of the PGMOL. And I think that's already, you know, from the few comments that we've read on this, it's already, yeah, it's a good idea, but you'll mess it up somehow. We know you're going to mess it up somehow. So yeah, interesting. Okay, well, let's move on from this, and we'll talk a little bit about Bobby Clark, obviously, 18-year-old midfielder for Liverpool, really highly thought of in the club, really good at dictating games. He's done that for the under-18s, he's done that for the under-21s and stuff. Real good passer of the football, bit of a metronome, if you will, of a player. We've seen him have 2 senior appearances, it is now, and he's had a little bit of an injury setback, unfortunately. So we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. And I think this will be gutting for him. Like, Ian Doyle's reporting that he's not expected to be back in action until the new year, having been absent from October the 1st. This comes as a blow as he returned to light train November, but has clearly been delayed in his comeback. I think he'll be a little bit gutted about this one, because he'd probably be hopefully looking at maybe a dead rubber game in the Europa League with qualification hopefully secured in December, and thinking he might have been able to get a start there. So it is a little bit of a setback for Bobby Clark, and we obviously will we'll obviously keep our eye on that one and see what develops, but hopefully he gets back with no more problems in the new year and is able to get back and playing football, and then hopefully pushing on for a place in the Liverpool first team squad. Sasha Tavalieri over on Twitter has said, what an amazing performance of Loïs Openda during this first half. This was last night. Belgian strikers adapting perfectly with the type of play that fits with RB Leipzig. The transfer market in the Premier League already went very hot on him as #LFC. Wonderful talent. I think this was an interesting one that he's actually name-checked Liverpool Football Club in his tweet. Whether anything comes from it, who knows? But 23-year-old centre forward, I've got his transfer market screen up in front of me now. You can see he plays, generally speaking, through the middle, but he can play on that left-hand side and he can play on that right-hand side as well. Current market value of €45 million. Here's where I'm interested, right? Let's have a look at his Champions League goals to game ratio. It's 4-5. In the Bundesliga, he's got 9-12 with 3 assists. So that's taking it to a goal involvement every single game at the moment in the Bundesliga. He's obviously of that age, isn't he? Whereby he may be about to take that leap, you know, 23 years old, starting to head into the prime of his career and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, this one. And I think the interesting thing for me on this is I'm just quite surprised that Liverpool are being linked with a forward. I think most Liverpool fans will be the same as me, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, of course. But there's been so much talk about a defensive midfielder, first and foremost. We're starting to hear more and more rumblings around centre-halves as well. And it seems like with Gakpo, with Jota, with Nunes, with Salah and with Diaz, we're pretty stocked in terms of forward players. But I suppose the other thing here is we know that Jurgen likes to stockpile forward players. They are ultimately the big difference makers on a football pitch on a weekly basis. Could this be one of those players where Liverpool are looking at him thinking, you know what? We don't think Mo's going to go anytime soon, but another versatile player who can play on the right, through the centre and on the left-hand side might be a good option for us. Maybe keeping tabs on him. Obviously, looking at the goal return, they're looking more than just the goal return, of course. But maybe there's a bit of future planning here. Obviously, we've had to deal with the loss of Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. We've had to plan ahead of time to try and change that forward line, which I think we have done for the most part. Obviously, Salah still being the incumbent on the right-hand side. We've obviously got Ben Doak there, who could maybe take over the mantle of Mo Salah if it's a year or 2 years away before he leaves the football club. I'd be surprised, to be honest with you, if if Liverpool went for another forward without addressing the clear areas of the team/squad that maybe need addressing first and foremost. But yeah, really interesting one there, I think. I'm going to move on then and just have a quick look at his FB ref. Now, I've got an add-on installed onto FB Ref that brings up sort of these graphics on the right-hand side of your screen now. And I thought, you know what? I'll compare him with Darwin Núñez. Over the last 365 days, you can see here that Loïs Openda in the sort of green and Darwin Núñez in the sort of red. Very, very similar in shape, spider graphs, if that's the right word. Obviously, Darwin's having more shots. He's got slightly more assists, slightly more non-penalty expected goals plus expected assisted goals, slightly more shot-creating actions, slightly more progressive carries, slightly more successful take-ons, touches, progressive receptions, quite a lot more tackles and quite a lot more blocks. But I think the rough shape is almost exactly the same. And you might look at angle, yeah, of course it is, Chris, they're both centre forwards. But, you know, you could see that the two of them are very, very similar players, which makes me think actually that, like, you know, whether Liverpool believe he can play on the right or the left is by the by. He looks like a centre forward. He plays as a centre forward. That's his position. It's also Darwin Núñez's position. They're around the same age. Darwin Núñez is already in the football club. Would you sign somebody unless you really truly believe that you're going to go and get better than Darwin Núñez? I'd be surprised if Liverpool went for someone like a Loïs Openda. Certainly in the summer transfer window, I'd be even more surprised if it was the January transfer window. Move on to a centre-back target then. Jean-Claire Todibo. Tottenham apparently interested in the £39 million man. Manchester United and Liverpool name-checked in this one as well. Tottenham have joined the race to sign Nice defender. Oh, let's read it the English way. Tottenham have joined the race to sign a Nice defender, Jean-Claire Todibo, as they prepare to enter the transfer market for a new centre-back in January. Obviously, we know that Tottenham Hotspur have got major issues at the moment. I think Mickey van der Ven's out injured. They've got injuries all over the place, haven't they? So I think I could understand why Tottenham are being linked. Let's have a little look at his transfer market then. He plays as a centre-back. He can play on the left-hand side of a two or the right-hand side of a two. He's 23 years old. He's 1m90. What's that? I have no idea, but it sounds tall. He's French and French Guinean. Has citizenship there. Contract up until 2027. Obviously played for some big sides really. I think obviously you can see there he's at Nice and it went, but he was currently, before that he was at Barcelona. He'd had loans at Benfica, Schalke, obviously came through at Toulouse before Barcelona signed him and stuff. So he's got a little bit of pedigree in terms of the teams that he's played for. He's obviously attracting good players at the moment. I did kind of the same thing on FB Ref with Jean-Claire Todibo and compared him to Ibou Konaté. Now, what's interesting is, again, they're the similar shape. They're both playing the same position. But in terms of interceptions and blocks and tackles, actually does a little bit more than Ibou Konaté. And that might be to the fact that Nice aren't as high up in the league as somebody like a Liverpool are. They do more defending than somebody like a Liverpool. And that is always the thing when you're comparing statistics of centre-backs. You know, a fella who plays for, historically, Stoke under Tony Pulis is going to look very different in the numbers compared to somebody like a Virgil van Dijk. And it's obvious really, isn't it? Liverpool dominate the ball, don't have as much defending to do. It's all more about the 1 or 2 times you have to do something during the game, can you do it? Can you keep that concentration? For Burnley, you're sitting in, teams are going to try and break you down. You have to make more and more tackles, more and more interceptions, more and more blocks, more and more headers. So statistically, defenders in worse sides always look better than centre-backs in good sides. Dejan Lovren's a classic example. Dejan Lovren looked absolutely brilliant for Southampton, playing alongside another centre-back with a DM sat right in front of him and full-backs tucked right next to him as a back four. Move him to a Liverpool Football Club where the full-backs play high up the pitch and defensive midfield as a passer and he wants to go forwards and help in the attack. And Dejan Lovren's left on an island that doesn't look anywhere near the same player, although, you know, I'm being a little bit harsh on him there because I think actually Dejan Lovren, all told, considering he had so many mistakes, was still a good centre-half at times for Liverpool. Excuse me. I'm going to move on to the next one, but before I do that, I'm going to get into some of the comments. John Sommers says, hi Chris, thoughts on the team lineup versus Lask? Do we go strong or rotate? Ooh, I've not really thought about it too much at the moment, John, to be honest with you. But I think it's going to be a rotation. I think we have to accept that the Premier League is the priority at this stage of the season. I don't think it's going to be as weak as what some people would think. Obviously, I think Kelleher is going to be coming in because of Alisson. I've not actually heard anything about Alisson. So if anyone's heard anything about Alisson, let me know in the comment section, of course. You know, we don't have too many options at left back, but we could see a Joe Gomez come in at either right back or left back potentially into this game. Maybe it's Kanate paired alongside Kwanzaa at the centre-back positions. I'd imagine Endo to come in. I'm already making a lot of changes here, aren't I? I imagine Gravenberch is going to come in. I imagine Harvey Elliott might come in and then play around with the forwards. Now, there are a lot of changes, but it's not a massively weakened side in terms of they're all first-team squad players, I think, that I've just named there. And therefore, Liverpool will hope to get the job done. Plus, it being at Anfield, I think, is obviously a thing. So hopefully that helps us. Colin Blackshaw just talking about the Loïs Openda stuff is Diaz is a shadow of the player we bought. Jota inconsistent, so yes, I feel another striker is needed. That's a really interesting take, that, Colin, and not something that I've really been approached with before, to be honest with you. You know, Diaz started this season, I thought, really well. His goals were up in those first few games and stuff like that. The injuries obviously had an impact. Real life, I think, has had an impact on Diaz. But I think the start of the season showed me that Diaz can start to get more goals and more assists. So I'm not too worried about that because there are extenuating circumstances, of course. In terms of Jota, I think the only thing inconsistent personally about Jota is that he's not in the lineup all the time. I think when he does play, he is consistent. But and here's a nod to your point, Colin, is he doesn't have the most impact on a game until he scores a goal. Some players are just like that. I feel he's one of the better squad players that you're ever going to get and can still do it in the first team when necessary. But everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course. Conor, I respect yours, mate. League guys, just get the win against Leicester so we can concentrate on the league. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll move on then to the next story, which was, according to Ojogo, Liverpool are looking to sign Benfica defensive midfielder 19-year-old Joao Neves. Excuse me. Liverpool have his name at the very top of their, and I'll insert this, Christmas wish list in all capital letters. Benfica want to extend his contract and raise his release clause to 150 million euros. The mentalists. Man United also want the player who's currently earning 520,000 per season. It's still a hell of a lot of money. Can we just have a little look at the article here? Joao Neves seduce Arsenal et Liverpool. So Joao Neves is seducing Arsenal, Liverpool. Alem de rival de Manchester o do club inglês viramo media o ficam impressionados. I'm going to have a stab at this. I'm assuming it's Portuguese. Also, the rivals of Manchester, the English clubs are impressed with him. I can't speak any. I don't even know what language it is. I've just took a stab in the dark, lads. Apparently, that's what it says. Who knows? Terry, I agree with your Jota point. Chris Haaland is the same. There's absolutely nothing all game and bags of Hattie. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at Joao Neves. Defensive midfielder. He can play, obviously you can see the sort of three positions that he can play there: defensive midfield, centre midfield, attacker midfield. He's 19 years old. He's 1.74 metres, which is smaller than the last player that we looked at. Current market value is 20 million quid. In terms of his statistics, actually, I'll just move on, and I've compared him to Alexis Mac Allister here, and actually in terms of his stats, his blocks, his interceptions, his tackles, his non-penalty goals, his passes attempted, his pass completion, all very high. Now, there is a formula that you do have to use when you're talking about comparing players in the Portuguese top league compared to Premier League players, and you do have to, clubs have a formula for this, believe it or not, where you just times it by 0.8 or whatever the formula is, or the figure is, and then you get to what you think they could do in the Premier League. So I'm not surprised to see those stats being a little bit better than somebody like Alexis Mac Allister. But I'll tell you what, in terms of aerials won, top 11%, in terms of blocks, top 1%, in terms of tackles, top 4%, in terms of passes attempted, top 2%. It is quite impressive. I'm just going to go and view the full scouting report there to see where else he's really sort of shining. In terms of shooting, his expected goals and his non-penalty expected goals are really high. His passes completed, obviously passes short, passes attempted, passes medium, even his long passes. Passes into the final third, top 9% there, you can see that. I'll shoot down to the goals and shot creating actions with a take on, top 3%, shot creating actions with a shot. I mean, really high goal creating actions, wow. Tackles attempted in the final third, a real high press sort of midfielder. Maybe his tackles won, top 1%, his blocks, top 1%, passes blocked, top 2%. Really, really impressive. And this is compared to midfielders in the last 365 days in the top 5 leagues as well. So we are comparing him to some really strong midfielders there. But then equally, as I mentioned before, we are also comparing him to players. He is creating these stats in the Portuguese league, which obviously is maybe not quite as good a level as some of the other leagues that we are comparing him with. So yeah, really interesting target. And again, it goes back to it, you know, the earlier point. I know Colin disagreed, of course, but about defensive midfielders, centre-backs, forwards. I think when you look at the squad, generally for myself anyway, and everybody's got different opinions, of course. I think the defenders and the defensive midfielder maybe is more important to Liverpool's squad building than a forward right now. Obviously, you're always going to keep tabs on forwards. If you see an opportunity, Liverpool will be opportunistic and try and grab a player that they think maybe wasn't available then or won't be available in the future if they were to wait. But I think, you know, Ibu Konate's injury problems, Joe Matip probably leaving at the end of the summer means that you're going to need another centre-half if you don't trust someone like a Joe Gomez to be the player that he was just a few years ago. Obviously, having someone who could be a bit more versatile would be a good thing. Obviously, the defensive midfielder thing, I think, is done to death. It looks to me like Jurgen is starting to like the idea of Alexis Mac Allister, but maybe... You know, maybe that's for the here and now, and we don't know what the future will hold. Personally, and I've kind of always said this, I do think Liverpool need a bit more of a defensive-minded midfielder, but who also has the passing ability of someone like Alexis Mac Allister, not just the destroyer. Those players are few and far between. Jurgen, I think, right now is looking at Mac Allister and thinking, yeah, sound with that. Until maybe the perfect player comes along. Could that be the lad that we looked at today in Joao Neves? Maybe. Could it be Stefan Bajcetic? Maybe. So yeah, interesting stuff, of course. So there you go. That has been Fan Interactive for today. We covered all the news stories. As I say, it was a bit of a quiet news day. Rumours more than concrete news for you today, so apologies for that one. It was good to have a little chat with you. Good to get a few things off my chest. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, of course. But before you go, we are running throughout December, a giveaway. Liverpool themed goodies given away every single day. We've got books, sweatshirts, posters, prints, but we've also got some incredible signed gear too, including a goalkeeper glove signed by Chris Kirkland, captain's armband signed by Lucas Leiva, a 2007 home shirt signed by Dirk Kuyt, and last season's home shirt signed by none other than Ibu Kanate. To get your name in those daily draws throughout December, go to redmenplus.com, join as a legend tier subscriber. You've got monthly or yearly available, and get on all the extra Boss podcasts. Your chance to win those Christmas treats. It's analysis, it's opinion, it's documentaries, it's news, it's expert and journo insight, as well as pre and post match shows, podcasts and videos, all available on redmenplus.com. And if you want to be in those daily draws, they are absolutely superb, then you have to be a legend subscriber. And I'll see you next time. Ta-ra.
Thank you so very, very much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like. The season is now well underway. If you need extra Red Men content, be it podcast, videos, documentaries, interviews, and general shows, fill your boots on redmenplus.com today.